Welcome back to your Heat latest on FanArc. I'm Sam Shapiro. If you haven't checked out the action on Underdog Fantasy yet, congratulations, you're living under a rock. You can actually get started by downloading the app with this nifty QR code right here on your screen, and you can browse a number of picks, whether it's college ball, the NBA action winding down this regular season, and more. And when you use our promo code BasketballFan, you can score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. So thank you to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring today's video, because I am still unbelievably frustrated that Miami cannot shake this losing streak, now extending to 5 games following a tough 25-point loss to San Antonio at home last night, 136-111, as they invited the Spurs into their house last night, the Kaseya Center, and pretty much got dominated. The game was pretty much over by halftime. Them trying to find a way to gain momentum in the second half, ultimately not really getting anywhere. And coming out in the second half, especially playing slow with just 23 points in the third quarter, pretty much was the dagger in the coffin in terms of Miami finding any sort of momentum to get back into this game. Victor Wembanyama had a great game for San Antonio as expected, 26 points on 11 of 22 shooting, 15 rebounds and 5 blocks in this contest, plus 19 in the plus-minus column for San Antonio. So comes as no surprise, the alien, so to speak, being Victor Wembanyama, Mr. I'm Not Normal, whatever you want to call him, having a typical night like that against Miami, especially in a game where Miami, not in a game where, just in general, we've talked about on the channel here how at least in that part of their front court, the 4 and 5 positions, Miami greatly lacking size. And I didn't really see Bam Adebayo and Kel'el Ware putting the clamps on Wembanyama last night, which, we clearly did not see on display. We did see Kel'el Ware have 22 minutes of play, but him basically chuck up a scratch of a game, and 7 points, 7 rebounds, 3 of 10 from the field, and finishing with -3 in the plus-minus column. Adebayo, second leading scorer, tied with Hero in this game, 18 points. Didn't have a great contest in this matchup, 5 of 17 from the floor, ultimately finishing -26 in the plus-minus column. So if anything, Wembanyama putting the clamps on Bam in this game, despite Adebayo, at least in the box score, looking, for the most part, pretty polished up. But it was also interesting to see Norman Powell back in the lineup for Miami, but him coming off the bench again in 30 minutes of play, 21 points, 7 of 18 shooting, in my opinion, had a better outing than Tyler Hero, who was in the starting lineup with 26 minutes played, 18 points on 6 of 11 shooting. So both guys shooting right around that, Hero closer to that 50% mark from the field in comparison to Powell's, but Powell scoring, 3 more points. We've talked about on the channel here how both of these guys can do the same things, at least from a scoring standpoint and from a defensive standpoint as well. But I think this is kind of at least the mock-up of what we're going to see, at least for the next 10 games that's remaining in Miami's regular season. Probably having Hero in the starting lineup, Powell come off the bench, but Powell still get a starter type of load in terms of minutes and what he's going to play on a given nightly basis. And quite honestly, I think this is what we're going to see now with Miami's roster, at least going into this game last night, being completely healthy. For once, I feel like this actually is the first time we've talked about this all season. We've talked about how Miami's, I think, drawn up 20, maybe 25 at least 20 to 25 different configurations of what their starting lineup has had to look like this season because of injuries. But in last night's contest, at least from what I saw, there was an injury report with no Miami players listed for once. And unfortunately, a fully healthy Miami team resulted in a 25-point loss. Now, granted, this is against the San Antonio Spurs, which I would say have legitimate NBA title contender written all over themselves. But you would have thought at the beginning of the year, if you were, entertaining the idea of Miami having their complete club fully healthy, ready to go, that it wouldn't result in one of their more detrimental losses that they've taken, especially through this month of March, where now Miami 5-5 riding through their last 10 games. So was nice to at least see Miami have a healthy lineup, but I don't necessarily know if that is going to work in the best favor for them, because all year they've had to adapt to constant changes, copy-paste jobs to certain areas, not just in their starting lineup, but in the depth chart down the line. And now having everything that's available to them, it almost kind of seems like Miami is this kid in a candy store where they've got all the sweets they could ask for and they don't necessarily know what to do with them. Do I eat all the candy at once and have a stomach ache later on? Or do I, kind of figure out how I want to ration my candy going forward? And I don't necessarily know if that analogy plays exactly to what this Miami Heat roster has had to do, but I definitely think Miami right now is trying to figure out, now that they at least, and again, this could also be subject to change. I wouldn't be surprised either, but at least in this scenario, if it becomes a consistent thing going forward, I don't know if Miami is confident in what options they would want to utilize first, and having completely shaken off this, I need to experiment and plug and play what configurations of this lineup work best. I personally think they don't know what the best configurations of their lineup look like right now. And yes, a lot of that has to blame with consistently they haven't been able to go with one specific configured starting five. So hopeful that the team is going to stay healthy at least through these next 10 games, because it could at least give Miami a better idea of who some of those, or at least what some of those more consistent, reliable configurations are going to look like going into the games that matter the most this regular season. Drop in the comments what you guys think Miami's lineup should at least kind of shape up to be going into the end of the regular season and into the playoffs, because these games coming up are going to be crucial if Miami wants to avoid the play-in tournament. Now, before I dive into what that's probably going to look like, or what we're kind of at least looking at from the outside looking in right now, before we dive into that, just going to take a moment here to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, that being, you guessed it, Underdog Fantasy. Fast breaks, buzzer beaters, and block parties are back, and Underdog is the best place to get in on all the action. Now, playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick whether your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like points, rebounds, steals, and more. Get your picks right, and you can win up to 5,000 times your cash. Now, this week on Underdog, I'm looking at tonight's matchup where the Charlotte Hornets are taking on the Sacramento Kings. I'm selecting LaMelo Ball for higher than 19.5 points, and I'm selecting DeMar DeRozan for lower than 15.5 points. Download the app today and use promo code BasketballFan to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. Again, that's promo code BasketballFan. It's all on Underdog. Make picks, win money.
Must be 18 plus. 19 plus in Alabama, Nebraska. 19 plus in Colorado for some games. 21 plus in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia. And present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. See assets.underdogfantasy.com/play and get terms DFSTML for details. Offer not valid in Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In New York, call the 24/7 helpline at 1-878 or text PMI 467-369.
Well, Miami is sliding down a slippery slope right now, winning only 5 out of their last 10, and out of their last 5, losing all 5 of those games. Arguably, in my opinion, more important than the previous 5 that came before. Really just tragic. I mean, when you go back to play, starting all the way on March 5th, Miami caps off out of these last 10, the first 5 winning them with a win against Brooklyn, 126-110, followed by an 8-point victory against the Charlotte Hornets. And then that came, after that, a very exciting win against the Detroit Pistons on Sunday, March 8th, 121-110. Then, obviously, the Bam 83 game against the Wizards, and then a 112-105 victory on Thursday, March 12th against the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, the 3 wins that stick out to me here, the Hornets, the Pistons, and the Bucks. The Bucks were a team that you had to worry about potentially coming back out of the closet to maybe sneak their way back into the play-in tournament, but I think at this point they've lost out so much that that's not necessarily a worry. You are able to beat Detroit, which ultimately doesn't shape up how the play-in looks, but most competitive team in the Eastern Conference from a record standpoint right now, so definitely a big win for Miami. And then beating Charlotte. That's a team that could potentially find their way around you in the play-in, and a much-needed win for Miami. But then you go ahead in your next 5, and then on top of losing to Orlando for the 5th straight time in a row this season, then you go and get completely blown out by Charlotte 3 days later on St. Patrick's Day by 30 points. And then you have Luka drop 60 on you 2 days after that. Then you lose to the Rockets at the buzzer following that game. And then you get completely destroyed by San Antonio last night. I don't know. When you talk about it like that, these 5 losses that Miami has suffered over the last 10 games they've played completely diminishes how exciting the 5-game win streak Miami went on previously to these 5 games was in any way, shape, or form, at least to me, because now the Miami Heat team you're looking at is sitting in the 9th seed at 38-34, at least from when I checked the standings last. You're, at least from a loss standpoint, tied with Charlotte. So Charlotte now is in a position where they could take the 9th seed from you. I don't think you necessarily have to worry about Milwaukee with their 41 losses. Lucky for Miami. But right now it's looking like Miami, if they can't find a way to at least win more than half of these next 10 games they have coming up, they're going to be sitting in the 10th seed going into this play-in tournament, which about a week and a half ago, it looked like Miami actually had a solid chance to break out of the play-in tournament and be where Atlanta is sitting right now at the 6th seed. Granted, you've got the Magic at 38-33. You've got the 76ers at 39-33. And then you've got the Hawks sitting at 40-32. So, I mean, if you play your cards right and Orlando and Philly find a way to lose a number of these games, and Miami's facing off against Philly coming up in one of their coming up contests. I mean, when you look at their schedule, obviously they've got a doubleheader against Cleveland and then a game against the Pacers next. But after that game against Indiana, they're going up against Philly on March 30th. Yes, that's correct. And so ultimately, if this is a game Miami is going to lose, it's going to be real tough trying to fight their way out of the 9th or 10th seed, because right now they have found their way sliding down the Eastern Conference standings so far, despite being so close, they're at the bottom of where they could potentially be. So, I mean, just looking at these next 10 games for Miami at least, and they're not going to be easy games. As I talked about the doubleheader with Cleveland, they could definitely win that game with Indiana. The game against Philly after that, I think, is going to be a toss-up. But then they've got to play Boston again after that. And they've clearly showed this season they can't beat Boston. Then they've got another game with the Wizards, which would be a gimme. And then they've got a doubleheader with Toronto, which can't see them winning either of those games as well. Granted, the doubleheader with Toronto is sandwiched with another game against Washington. So between the game with Indiana and the 2 with Washington, that should be 3 more wins that Miami can squeeze out this season. But after that game against the Wizards, you've got one more game against Atlanta. Granted, if you could win that game, that'd be great. But I think at that point, it's going to be pretty much said and done where Miami is going to end up in the play-in. Granted, the race is so close it might not be. So at this point, Miami's just got to win out these next 10 games, if you're asking me. I think they're definitely going to drop the game to Boston. They're going to drop one to Cleveland. I think they will find a way to beat Philly, but that's a tall glass of milk I feel like I'm asking for at that point in time. Drop in the comments what you guys think Miami needs to do to prevent continuing to slide down the Eastern Conference standings. Last talking point that I want to bring up here in today's episode is Norman Powell. Obviously, we had talked about at the beginning of this episode, him getting starter quality minutes in this game. But now it looks like him and Hero are going to, at least Miami is going with at least a rotation that presents the idea of Hero and Powell are both going to be healthy, and this is how we are going to play both guys moving forward. Seems like Miami is set in stone on having Hero in the starting lineup with Mitchell to complement that backcourt, again, of Tyler Hero and Davion Mitchell, and then having Norman Powell come off the bench in a starter type of role. But Norman Powell has made it very clear that he wants to be a starter for this team. And considering he was an all-star this year and the main driving motor offensively for this team for the majority of the year outside of what Bam Adebayo has been able to do, I think Powell has earned the right to at least be in the starting lineup for Miami this regular season. I think depending on how the offseason shapes up, you maybe could alter or, edit what that might look like going into the 26-27 season. But we've seen the majority of Miami's success this year with Norman Powell in the lineup, with Tyler Hero coming off the bench. And I'm not saying that Tyler Hero isn't a starter caliber type of player, because obviously he is. This Miami Heat team just suffers so much defensively when both of these guys are in the starting lineup together that it almost doesn't make any sense to have them start and then within 5 minutes pull one out of the game. It doesn't really let either player have time to heat up or get comfortable being in the game. So it really doesn't make sense. So I think if Miami, based on what they've been doing over the last couple of games where they've had Hero in the starting lineup and Powell come off the bench, I think if that's what they plan to go with on a consistent basis, there could be concern for Norman Powell potentially to leave Miami this offseason. Do I think Miami should let that happen? I don't really know yet, because I want to see how this postseason pans out. I think if you have a scenario where you've got Hero leading the charge and he is able to at least carry Miami to a semifinals appearance, maybe a conference finals appearance, then I think maybe you can go back to the drawing board and debate, okay, if I have to go with one of these two players leading the charge, who do I go with? But if Tyler Hero is a classic first-round exit, like I feel like we've seen more consistently from him, then I think all the writing on the wall is there to at least try to move forward with Norman Powell. But I see both sides of the argument where you have a younger Tyler Hero that, if he can stay healthy, could definitely be the future offensive engine this team needs. But Norman Powell is that on a more consistent basis right now. The problem is he's just not super duper healthy either, and there's no confident reassurance that he is going to be able to keep up these numbers for 5, 6, 7 seasons going forward with, him being the age he's at right now. So drop in the comments what you guys really think Miami needs to do this offseason in terms of sticking with Hero or sticking with Powell, or seeing what trade assets you could garner for either, or if this situation at hand where having Hero in the starting lineup and then Powell coming off the bench creates concern, if that's going to push Norman Powell to want to leave the Heat in the future. Because I definitely think it is a little bit, because he has already voiced that he wants to be a starter. And I definitely think he has earned that title based on the play and how that has contributed towards Miami winning games this season. That's going to do it for this Tuesday's episode of your Heat Latest here on FanArc. Don't forget to drop a like on this video. And if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. We've got great daily content you don't want to miss, all right here, Monday through Friday. Thanks again so much for joining us this Tuesday. I'm Sam Shapiro. Have a great day.